What should the free agency plan for the Dolphins look like in 2026? I am glad you asked. I put together mine, and we're going over it here on the show.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who have helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome to episode 2 of the 2026 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint. This is our annual fully simulated offseason. And it's a very trying exercise every year. It is an exceptionally difficult exercise this year, trying to, project a healthy cap future and do so in a way while also trying to find some long-term answers that are maybe diamonds in the rough. Yesterday on the show, if you missed it, we did 5 big picture objectives. We talked about cash versus cap and what the Dolphins spending budget in cash should look like, how to circumvent and manipulate the levers that are available with their contracts to become salary cap compliant to go about their business, trading, cutting, restructuring a few players on the roster. It was a great show yesterday. And I'm going to pick up where we left off with, after all of the moves that I would be making if I were the Dolphins, as best as you possibly can in the next 6 days. Things that should happen fast was yesterday. There's one additional thing and domino that we did not call upon that we're going to touch on now. And it is the contract situation with one Austin Jackson, because there was some comments that John R. Sullivan reportedly made it to the local Miami media about Austin Jackson and his status with the team. And he would like to have Austin Jackson back, but things, quote unquote, have to work themselves out there, which has given a lot of speculation about a reworked contract, potentially in a pay cut, where Austin's owed $11.5 million and has missed the better part of half of the last 2 seasons. Now, I'll say this. If the Dolphins can't get Austin Jackson to play ball, I would simply release Austin Jackson and pay Larry Borum half the amount of money to come back and to be the preferably utility offensive lineman, because hopefully the draft breaks in a certain way and you can get somebody else in free agency or via trade that would come in. I want that tackle spot budgeted for about $6 million as compared to 11.5. Now, there's a precedent for this, and it happened last year. But real quick, when we went through the 2026 Miami Dolphins offseason blueprint, episode 1 yesterday, and we did all the dominoes we talked about, I got us to about $27.2 million in cap space. And creating this space, the objective is not to spend it all. And that's very, I cannot impress that enough, because we're going through free agency today, right? And I'm going to get us a little bit more space with this proposed Austin Jackson restructure. The precedent for Austin Jackson and a reworked contract was made last year with the Indianapolis Colts and Braden Smith, who, for my money, has been, I think, when both players are healthy and at their best, I think they're comparable talents as at their peak quality starters. I don't think Austin Jackson, with the injuries the past 2 years, you could qualify him as a quality star. And the same thing was the case for Braden Smith, who was on a 4-year, $70 million contract. The Colts cut Smith's contract from $14.75 million to $8 million of max value amid injury concerns last year. This happened last year. So it's almost a 50% pay cut. So my proposal for taking this precedent and applying it to Austin Jackson would be to cut the compensation package from 11.5 to 5.88 million plus 2.5 million that is available in playtime incentives. So every game you dress, you get 1/17 of $2.5 million. And then that way the slashing and the pay cut really is fractional compared to Braden Smith almost got a 50% cut. If you could get Austin Jackson to agree to an amended contract with earnings potential like you did with Bradley Chubb last year, that proposal would save the Dolphins $5.6 million in cap space. And obviously $5.6 million in cash that is owed to them. And then you would have to pay back potentially 2.5 of that with salary cap adjustments. But again, because we're not spending all our cap space, if we have incentives that hit, we're going to have plenty of wiggle room and it's not going to cost us in the long run anyway, because the rest of our strategy elsewhere. And if Austin doesn't want to play ball, his $11.5 million is non-guaranteed. That becomes a release for me. And then at that stage, we would probably pivot to trying to get Larry Borom. It was reported coming out of the combine that Larry Borom is going to get quote unquote low-end starter money. That could be anywhere from $4 million to like $8 million. And Borom for in the middle of that would be my response. And again, this is something that I would want to have done before the start of the league year so that I know what my cap situation is. But if my proposal to Austin Jackson, if it were to go through, you'd be seeing about $34 million in cap space, because we did things like moving the money around within the Tua Tagovailoa contract, knowing full well we can roll it over into 2027 and negate what we deferred into future years because he's going to be off the roster this summer anyway. I just want to give myself a longer runway, and I want to play with the cap levers and then know once I play with the cap levers with Tua's contract, it becomes ineligible to proactively cut June 1st. So now I just have to carry him until June 1st, and then I can release him if I'm not going to get a trade. So there's plenty of wiggle room here in the sense of where we started, which was like $900,000 in cap space, trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, adjusting the Tua contract, knowing we're going to hold him till the summertime, and then at that point we'll cut him loose. Getting this Austin Jackson contract worked out. The next step for us is we have to assess the roster that we have. And then we have to assess the players that are expiring contracts and decide who we want to bring back. It's pretty lean at the top. As you look at the roster assessment pre-free agency, I have 4 roster cornerstones. I would have had 5, but we've moved on from Minkah Fitzpatrick and the proposal trade that happened yesterday. Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Jordan Brooks, and Aaron Brewer, I classify as the 4 cornerstones on the roster when you consider the caliber of play. I think if Patrick Paul takes another leap next year, I will put him in that cornerstone bucket as well. But it's obviously a 1-year sample size as a starter in the NFL. I think he and Zach Sealer, I know Zach was down a little bit last year. I think there's some context behind that. But those 2 guys, for me, I would consider to be quality starters. I think back to when we did this exercise, guys, in 2023, I think we had 7 cornerstone players on the roster. Now we have 6 cornerstone, 6, 7. Sorry, it's my bad. 6 cornerstone and quality starters combined. It paints a very vivid picture to put the players in the buckets and try to reconcile, where the roster's at, which is why they're making the changes that they are, right? I do think Austin Jackson, when on the fields, should be considered a sufficient level starter. And the only player that I saw enough consistency out of from the rookie class, from the start of the year to the end of the year, to feel like I know what bucket I want to put him in, that's not an incomplete evaluation, is Jordan Phillips. I think as a nose, he's already a sufficient level starter. Can he get better? Absolutely. I think he could be an impact player. But he was the guy that had the point of attack stuff down. The block deconstruction I thought was consistent enough. That's, for me, like the upper echelon of your rosters. You have 8 total players that are sufficient starters, quality starters, and cornerstone players. You've obviously got a rookie class of Quinn Ewers and Ollie Gordon and Kenneth Grant and Jonas Savaianaya and Dante Trader and Jason Marshall and Zeke Biggers. Those guys are all incomplete evaluations that are probably going to fall by the end of this next season somewhere on the spectrum. And then you have some depth pieces. You're hoping some of these guys become not depth pieces and they take a step forward. Chop Robinson, hello. First round pedigree, I'm talking to you. Jalen Wright, Malik Washington, I think his floor is a quality depth player and a special teams demon. Juju Brents with his pedigree. Tyrell Dotson, I would put in the quality depth bucket with the full season of starting this past year for the Miami Dolphins. So that's the assessment of the roster. It's pretty lean, and after moving things around and remembering that we have a cash budget, we want to spend somewhere between 90 to 95% of this year's salary cap in cash. We have our work cut out for us. And we're going to get into what I think we should do with that money with both internal and external free agencies next here on Locked On Dolphins. Offseason Blueprint. Make sure you guys stick with us. Tax season is upon us. And for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment is not always the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations available nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. Just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve while you go and get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your tax appointment. Free agency is upon us, and now so are we. You can get 1 month free of the Everydayer Club here on the Locked On Network with code FREEAGENCY, no spaces, now through March 15th. Go ad-free. Keep this conversation going on the Locked On community Discord as well. The club link is in the show description. So let's talk about free agency, right? We've established how much cap wiggle room we have. We've established we've got what's pretty tight in the way of amount of roster spaces that need to be signed. We've established in weeks past that the Packers' MO is really not spending money in free agency, but they do take care of their own. And I think there's some players that make some sense. A lot of the deals that I'm going to be working right now, both in internal and external free agency, are going to be a lot of one-year deals. And I tried my best to be aggressive enough with projections, although some of them I could see getting outpriced. And if players choose not to read, like we're going to do internal first. If those guys want to go hit the market and they price themselves out of the offers that I have, cool. Then just understand that response is to stay within the budget. It's don't chase the player, stay in the budget and go to the next name on the list. And I could probably do a week's worth of programming on what the third and fourth contingencies are for every spot that we're going to talk about in this roster because there's so damn much of it that needs to be addressed. But we're not going to do that. We are going to look at which free agents to be I would bring back. It was cool that one of these was done yesterday. That's Ethan Bonner, cornerback on a exclusive rights restricted free agent deal to come back with the team. That's no guaranteed money, 1.075. It's like a minimum salary contract for Ethan Bonner. And with the needs that the Dolphins have at corner, I figure, hey, why not? We'll bring him back. I am re-signing 2 quality starters from last year's team, if that makes you feel some type of way. The bad news is it's Jake Bailey and Joe Cardona, a couple of specialists with a punter and a long snapper. The dollars that I have there, I actually have Jake Bailey on a 2-year deal worth $6 million in total value. It's pretty handsome money for a punter. It's a competitive market contract for punters that would give him $3 million over each of the next 2 seasons. Joe Cardona, a little bit above minimum salary, right? Because you don't want to say, hey, I'm just going to offer a minimum salary and assume that he's coming back. But he played last year on a minimum salary deal. Have him coming back for 1.5. The big one was which one of the corners comes back? Rasul Douglas, Jack Jones. I went with Kader Kohu, and it goes back to what we talked about with the offseason objectives yesterday. Under construction being something that I'm trying to prioritize with every roster decision that we make. Kader Kohou, coming in age 27, season he turns 28 in November. As compared to Jack Jones and Rasul Douglas, guys that are probably going to be more expensive because they're coming off of years in which they played where Kader didn't play last year. But Kader was on the restricted free agent original round tender. I'm Miami. I'm offering him $3.5 million on a 1-year deal, which is effectively what he was going to have last year. Right? I can't imagine the stock's going to be super high because he missed all year last year with the ACL. He was cleared yesterday by his doctors, which is great timing for him. If he was not going to be cleared, I was going to go in a different direction and have a higher dollar amount to pay Rasul Douglas to come back. But the tiebreaker for me was, okay, I know Kader's cleared. Kader, I see some parallels to like what the Packers went for last year with Nate Hobbs. I have him on a 1-year deal for 3.5, which is, again, just a slight bump over what he was going to make last year before he got hurt. And then I have Greg Dulcich and KJ Britt. I also have Julian Hill. Julian Hill's a restricted free agent. I chose not to give him a restricted free or an unrestricted free agent like an original round tender. I chose to give him a 2-year contract extension for Julian Hill to be the inline tight end / Y. I think he's got enough blocking chops, and I can see him continuing to get better in that regard as a player. I don't want to give him too much, but you look out, I kind of was on the fence about, do I just want to go for a minimum salary player? But I do think the familiarity with some of the personnel that he's working with, and especially like Devon Achane, right? Like his ability to read blocks for guys in front of him and understanding Julian's body position and how he's addressing a block, especially with an offense and a running back in Devon that likes to get out on the edges. I thought it was worth non-minimum salary for me on a multi-year deal. And his cap charge is a little lighter. I have Julian Hill because it's a 2-year deal. You could spread that out across 2 seasons. I gave no void years on any of these contracts. I'm not going to sit here and say void years are the devil, but I think void years are counterproductive to where we are at right now. So it's more short-term deals, lower dollar amounts, and role players, right? Greg Dulcich, probably a role player. KJ Britt back on a 1-year deal. He played for like minimum last year. Get him back on a $1.5 million deal. Joe Cardona, Jake Bailey, those are obviously specialists. Julian Hill could be a starter, preferably as a role player. And Kader Kohou's probably a starter. I think, when healthy, he certainly was a starter. So what do those 7 names do for this salary cap situation that we had coming into free agency? Again, the budget's more important than the names. Right? And, maybe these guys go out and they pursue free agency and you don't get them done. But Kader Kohou on a 1-year deal for $3.5 million, that's going to be a $3.5 million salary cap charge. Jake Bailey and Julian Hill were the 2 guys on the multi-year contracts. 2 for $6 for Jake Bailey. Julian Hill got 2 for $6.5. Yeah, 2 for $6.5. Greg Dulcich, 1 for $2.5. Right, coming off his rookie contract, has had some injury stuff. If he gets more than that, north than that, I'd be willing to go to 3 and then tip my hat and say, hey, best of luck. Right, just because the body of work of being healthy and staying on the field hasn't been great. If push really came to shove and they really held my feet to the fire, I would probably give Greg Dulcich the Julian Hill contract and then let Julian Hill walk. Right? But it's the budget's important here. KJ Britt, Joe Cardona, Ethan Bonner's already done that. You didn't really have any say there, but Britt and Cardona is guys that played on minimum salary deals last year. Shouldn't have any issues getting those guys back. But I think KJ Britt, as a special teamer, I think brings you a lot of value. I kind of like what he does as a thumper between the tackles as well. This brings the Dolphins salary cap salary cap space from 33.9 to 25.3, because again, we're spending and we're not putting it on the credit card bill. We're just spending it. And from a cash perspective, and that cash includes practice squad, that includes contract extensions for guys that get pay raises like Aaron Brewer and Jordan Brooks. That includes signing your rookie draft picks. After bringing those players back and trimming the fat elsewhere that we have on the roster, The Dolphins season budget has between $50 and $65 million in cash to spend the rest of the way. Because we are, again, going back to trying to spend 90 to 95% of this year's $301.2 million cap to avoid spending and deferring more debt into future years. We're trying to use this year to offload the debt from the past build as much as we possibly can. So from there, what did the Dolphins do in external free agency? I have 7 names, 7 external free agents to go with 7 internal free agents. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Workplace chaos, deadlines staffing up, inboxes overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting unopened. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you are looking for from a skills, experience, and location perspective. So you're not just sitting around hoping that the right candidate falls into your lap. Here's a stat that says it all. And the minute that I'm going to talk to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching, more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. College basketball action nonstop, big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. And from early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. Now, FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger payouts and potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits your beat. And you can make spreads, totals, player props, and match how you see the slate playing itself out as well. And then apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. You can go safe, go bold, or ride with the team that you've been riding with all season long. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. So the roster assessment in the books. The internal free agent group, I'm bringing back 7 names from last year's squad. External free agency is tough, and this was the area that raked us over the coals last year because of just how crazy free agent spending got. That's the bad news. The good news is we're really not in the market for the Will Fries and Nate Hobbses of the world this year. Right? Hobbs got 4 for $48, and Will Fries got the only 5-year deal of any player in the market and got like $18.5 million per season on average. Stupid money. We're not looking for those kinds of players. So coming in and knowing full well that the objectives that we had for this offseason were focused on cap health, setting a precedent on how we go about our business, how we handle ourselves in free agency, it being under construction where every move we make has to be with a consideration to what is a long-term payoff for this personnel decision. Those are the primary objectives with free agency. So I've got 6 names. Let's take a walk. We'll do 2 at a time. In the trenches, external free agents, 27-year-old offensive guard Cordell Volson. 1 year, $2.5 million total is about what I have budgeted here. It's the Larry Borum deal from last year. Volson came into the league from North Dakota State as a mid-round draft choice, started for the Bengals right away. They have gradually tried to phase him out. But as an off-a-rookie contract player who played in an offense that is, let's be frank, exceptionally difficult because of how much empty protection Joe Burrow likes to play with, I think there's meat on the bone here. I think playing in that offensive line in their drop-back passing game is as high a degree of difficulty of assignment as an offensive lineman can get. And Dalton Risner came in there and just signed a contract extension for like 3.5. like yesterday. So I'd like to think if Risner got 3.5, Volson, who I think there's meat on the bone for, is probably not going to be getting north of 3.5 as a guy that the Bengals have pretty much relegated, right? Because they drafted Dylan Fairchild last year. Dalton Risner comes in. And everybody, last year, Larry Borum was the worst offensive lineman in the history of the league because he couldn't block for 3.5 seconds for Caleb Williams and Justin Fields with their inconsistent launch platforms. Turned out to be a pretty darn good role player. Unfortunately, he had to start 11 games. And I think if he's a primary starter, you're probably going to be left wanting more. I think Volson can come in and compete for a starting job at an offensive line that's much more play action, pass oriented and heavy. Very different style of play than what Cincinnati has. Cleveland Farrell, 1 year, $2 million. He played last year for Met Minimum in San Francisco, 28 years old, former top 5 pick. Sometimes these role specific guys, I think he can be a 500 snap taker for you on the defensive line. I think he's a role player, but the Dolphins need some snap takers, especially if they're going to be going through a rotation. And the Packers defense, it really liked their heavy defensive ends, which is a great setup for Charles Omenihu as my next pick here. He is coming off a contract that he played for $4 million with Kansas City. I'm offering 4.5 on a 1-year deal. No void years, obviously, $2.5 million signing bonus. So he gets more than half his money up front. Omenihu, good length, good physicality. Him and Cleveland Farrell give you kind of guys that can play at the point of attack very differently than what Chop Robinson can. And then obviously we have the draft to sort out as far as what we're going to get with the pass rush. Tyquan Thornton, former second-round draft choice from New England. He signed and played last year. It was a vet minimum deal for 1.1. Not a volume player in the passing game, but 6'2", vertical speed, plenty of speed to burn, probably going to be on a prove-it deal opportunity. Come down to Miami and be the speed player, right? I think that frees up Jalen Waddle to be able to move around in the slot a little bit more. They said they kind of wanted some diversity. They didn't want a bunch of 5'9" guys in the wide receiver room. Tyquan Thornton, 6'2". So he's getting more than 3 times what he got paid last year when he caught like 30-something passes but averaged like 20 yards a catch. If he gets priced out, if somebody goes crazy and says, hey, Tyquan Thornton, big-time field stretcher in Kansas City, we want to bring him into the fray here, you have to understand you're probably going to have to move to the next guy down the board. But Thornton's the one for me that has the youth at age 25, has the draft pedigree as a second-round pick, has a physical skill set, really struggled when he first came into the league. But that's the under construction. What's the long-term payoff? I've got 3 more free agents, including one from last year. We're going to run it back with the Joe Noteboom request. Utility offensive lineman, has played guard, has played tackle, was in Baltimore last year on a minimum deal. Projecting him to get a little bit more to that if he wants to come to Miami. One year for $2 million. $500,000 signing bonus, no void years on the back end of it, which would yield a $2 million cap charge to be kind of your Larry Borum replacement, if you will. That role on the offense. And then obviously we'll see what we get in the draft. We cut Jason Sanders, so it's time to find ourselves a kicker. How's this one for you? Eddie Pinheiro, who played his high school in South Florida, and then also kicked in Carolina for Chris Tabor, the Dolphins' new special teams coordinator. 1 year, he played for $1.2 million, 30-year-old kicker. There's kind of those guys play musical chairs. I think the connection here with Miami makes a lot of sense. So obviously we didn't break the bank anywhere here. Like Omenihu's like a decent signing at 4.5 on a 1-year deal. Tyquan Thornton at 3.5. And I know we kind of said, the Packers don't give that north of $2.5 million figure on the open market. But I do feel like with all of the vacancies that the Dolphins have, some of these kinds of moves, and again, we're moving and operating not with outrageous amounts of deferred debt and void years on contracts and all that kind of stuff. These are all 1-year deals. We're placing some economically friendly open market bets and seeing if we can't hit on 2 or 3 of these guys that would say, hey, we're halfway through the season next year. We really like it. It's working. We're going to sign a contract extension because you're in the prime of your career physically. That's the goal. And I think the last name that I have here for suspense, is it a quarterback? No, it's not a quarterback. It's Reed Blankenship, safety from Philadelphia, age 27 season. He signed a 1-year contract extension in 2024 going in the last year of his deal that was valued at $3.75 million. I have Miami giving him a 2-year, $11 million contract with about a year and a half of that fully guaranteed. I did put 1 void year on the back end of this contract, just, and we're weaning off of it. It's like the baby with the bank, right? Or the baby with the woolly. I put 1 void year on this just to give myself the wiggle room, because if you remember, when we went back, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Reed Blankenship for just a second, but when we went back to kind of the first salary cap projection with the 27.2, and then we did the Austin Jackson adjustment, and we were at $33.9 million. We talked about the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade being something that I didn't want to have to rely on to execute anything that I did. So when you think about the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade proposal and theory with the Austin Jackson proposed navigation of the salary cap, all of the moves combined are not dependent on the cap space required. All of our internal and external free agents can be executed without those 2 things happening. Now, Reed Blankenship didn't have his best season last year. I think that's going to help the Dolphins get their hands on him at a little bit more of a friendly rate. I have him at $5.5 million, which is pretty decent starting safety money. Now, it's not like double-digit $10 million, and I know Reed, there was a player I asked around a little bit at the NFL Combine, and they talked about, how there was a lot of time that was invested with Andrew Makuba and Jahad Campbell as the linebackers in front, that getting the rest of the group kind of lined up, communicated on the same page. I think he can be a quality starter at his best. I think right now he's a sufficient level starter. You add all this up, and we went from, $900,000 in cap space to the Minkah trade with the Tua juggle 27, which is moving the Tua money around in this contract, what we just talked about at length yesterday, with the Austin Jackson renegotiation up to 34. And then we bring back our own internal free agents, and we have our external free agency window. And we still have more than $11.5 million in salary cap space. Plus, we get $20 million in salary cap space in June for Bradley Chubb. Salary cap's not going to be a problem with this approach. Maybe we have to cut a player out here, a player out there. If Minkah and Austin don't play ball and the prices go up a little bit. But generally speaking, this would be the blueprint of what I would like to try to follow. And there's some names that are helpful. And hopefully we don't get blasted by the free agent market like we did last year, because that was tough. Sit here and feel like, hey, I put a 20% open market tax on this, and then everybody went 30% over that. So a lot of quality depth players, and you're seeing a lot of young quality depth players. Who's going to elevate? Who elevates and earns a sufficient starter or quality starter tab? What are your guys off your rookie class this year and last year are going to come in and elevate? And there's also a quarterback conundrum that we still have to solve. We'll do that tomorrow here on the show. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in, Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. I will talk to you all again soon. Fins up.